I feel like it's been a little while since, like, I don't know, since Entrada or La La Land Records has released a really great soundtrack. Maybe it hasn't been that long, but it just, I don't know. But then I think about, well, wait, what movies would I actually want a complete soundtrack for, like that they would do one of their beautiful re-releases of. I suppose Call the Conqueror comes to mind. Maybe Disney's The Three Musketeers, the one with Charlie Sheen and all those guys. I love that movie. And what was the name? Chris O'Donnell. Sorry, Chris O'Donnell. Man, that was a great little movie. Tim Curry was in it and playing Richelieu, Cardinal Richelieu. Oh, damn. Yeah, I mean, there's a few out there where I would love to have the soundtrack. So sure, there's still room to grow. Or maybe give me, what I'd really love? Let me tell you. So, let's see, I guess it's be Entrada, not La La Land. But Entrada, I think it was Entrada. And it's tough because they'll release each other's work and you don't know who's releasing what. But they did a really, really great special releases of the soundtracks by Stu Phillips for both Battlestar Galactica, the 78 Battlestar Galactica. Not to say, if I was actually going to give credit somewhere for the new Battlestar Galactica, Bear McCreary's score was really unique. In fact, that's probably the most unique and I think game-changing music in the entertainment industry since probably Don Davis's Matrix soundtracks, which were, just tremendous for all of the movies because they're all great. But yeah, Bear McCreary, like that music was really something special. He hit on something, and I think that's why he's still getting a lot of work. But yeah, Stu Phillips, they did these big, like for every season, they did these big 4-disc releases for Battlestar Galactica, for Buck Rogers in the 25th Century with Gil Gerard and all that. I would love for them, I mean, while they're releasing Stu Phillips shit, and because he's phenomenal, let's get a nice 4 or even 8-disc Knight Rider soundtrack. I think that'd be awesome. And maybe the reason they haven't really done it is because a lot of Knight Rider, they actually just played, popular music for its day. Like you'd get a Phil Collins song in there or something like that. Kind of similar with A-Team, which is another one with music by Mike Post that I would definitely take, some multi-disc sets of the music. I love A-Team was so... Man, the stories I could tell. Anyway, you're not here for that. You're here for your Wednesday Q&A. Woo! For Sovereign Tech patrons only. A couple things I want to get into real quick. One is that this Sunday, okay, some people I know, they literally only look in their podcast feed. They don't interact whatsoever with the Patreon page. And that's fine. You don't have to. I don't blame you. These days, I try to interact with the internet as little as possible, which is a funny thing for, a tech guy or a guy that runs a tech show to say, but it's what I'm feeling. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this Q&A because there's an overall abstract, shall we say, ethos that I'm really starting to realize that is going to be a part of Sovereign Tech Prime episodes here in the very near future. It's not an in fact, it's the opposite of anti-tech or of Ludditism or anything. But anyway, we'll get into that in a minute. But anyway, this Sunday, the 8th, July 8th at 4 p.m. Eastern, will be our July live Q&A hangout, which everybody always seems to really enjoy. And it's always nice to get people. I mean, and you can look with the live Q&A hangouts. Okay, if you haven't been to one in a while, I mean, you can just ask questions in the YouTube chat, and I can run off of that. You don't have to get on camera. You don't have to turn on video. You don't have to turn on audio. You can come in and have video and audio, or just audio. You can't do just video though. But you can, any way you want to interact with the live Q&A, there's plenty of ways to do that. I'm always honored when you do. So that is coming up July 8th. That's this coming Sunday, July 8th at 4 p.m. Eastern. It runs about an hour. So just so you know that's coming up. Okay, but why don't we, so this is something, there's two points to this. One is that I got an actual question, and I'm going to address it here because A, it came from a patron. B, it was pretty respectful. And C, there's a small issue going on. And the small issue is what I'll start off with. So the question actually is in response to the latest Sovereign Tech newsletter. But the issue, part C here, going backwards, the issue is that, and I've noticed it in my own email address. Stephanie noticed it in her email address. But there is the Sovryn Tech newsletter is ending up in people's spam folders. And it's not just Gmail, even though I've heard some people say GMX, it didn't end up doing that. But Gmail seems to be commonplace. I'm looking into why the hell that is. I don't know if it's because the subject line is so similar or because I put emoji in the subject line. I have no idea why that's happening. But if you haven't been getting, because I've been doing 2 a month lately, if you have not been getting the Sovryn Tech newsletter, check your spam folder, okay? And it's probably there. Now, before I get into the second part about the Sovryn Tech newsletter, okay, and then the next one's coming out very soon. And then there'll I'm actually certain there'll be 2 in July. Before I do that, first off, thank you everybody for the great response. I released both of Stephanie's works/talks from PorkFest 2018 and got great response from people about that. She's just the best, like just straight up, right? Like Stephanie is just amazing. She is the goddess of space, time, love, and beauty. I mean, there's just no question about it. She's amazing. So I'm glad that you enjoyed that. The other thing is that I also got a lot of very kind words from my episode about Harlan Ellison. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for understanding, and thank you for, I don't think everybody jumped ship from hearing an episode where I spent a lot of time concentrating on Harlan Ellison, but I have a venue and I used it. I used it to put that out there, and I didn't want it to be some kind of special episode. I wanted it to be a main episode. I wanted people to hear it. I wanted people to understand, my loss, and not just my loss, but I think the loss the whole world felt, whether it realizes it or not. So anyway, but speaking of people jumping ship from Sovryn Tech, I want to read this here. And this is in response to, again, the latest Sovryn Tech newsletter, which would be issue 18 from June of 2018. And here we go. Mr. Sovryn. I'm going to stop for a second. I like that. I'm not sure. There's a few people who call me Mr. Sovryn. Real quick. All right, before I read on this. Isn't that kind of weird? Has anyone else noticed this? Like that, didn't like 20 years ago, didn't everybody call themselves Mr., Miss, Mrs.? Or not themselves, didn't call themselves that, but didn't you call, like if you were an adult and you were talking to another adult, you would address them as Mr. whatever their last name was. You would not address them as Bob or, whatever their first name was. Not right out of the gate unless they actually said to you, oh, please call me this. Isn't it kind of like that? To me, and I don't know, maybe it's because I'm not in the city anymore or something, and somehow in cities, which are just the bastard stepchildren of culture, and not in a good way. Maybe in cities it's still a popular thing to do. I don't know. But like nobody calls each other, nobody's that formal anymore. Everybody instantly goes for the first name. Isn't that strange? Does anyone else notice that? You can, write underneath this sound on Patreon if you want to tell me if I'm crazy, or if where you are, it's perfectly commonplace. Everybody still says, oh, Mr. Smith, oh, Mr. Lynch, oh, Mr. blah, 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 nice to see you. Or, oh, Mrs. Robinson. Ooh, nice to meet you. Maybe that's still a thing. I have no idea. Because it wasn't just a thing with kids. Like adults would do it between each other. And I don't know. Well, anyway, not that I want to hold on to any traditions. I don't. Not unless they're ones that I've created with this show. But hey, maybe it's out there. Anyway, reading on. Mr. Sovryn, just received your latest issue of the Sovryn Tech newsletter, and I'm left with a question. You put out such great professional content. Well, okay. First off, thanks, Ellen, she makes it professional because I'm not professional. But let's see. Well, anyway, yeah, that's all saying that. But then you always sully it with things that a XXX rating wouldn't even cover. I think everything you do could reach a much larger audience and receive a lot more respect if you just pulled out your more extreme content. Your writing is actually pretty good if it wasn't like some kind of weird Japanese daydream. And I say all of this with respect. Keep doing what you're doing, and you probably won't listen to me, but consider it. Okay, so I'm not going to take that as an insult. I get this kind of email or message or whatever all the time. All the time. And usually it's not done in such a nice way. Like, I mean, that did feel, the person like said, hey, I'm being respectful, but like it felt relatively respectful except for the weird Japanese daydream part. So here's the thing with this, okay? I actually completely understand what you're saying. I get your point. And I'm going to tell you this. You are probably right. That if I took all of that kind of shit out, if I took out the intros, if I didn't write, or if the short fiction wasn't erotic short fiction and maybe it was just a little fun Star Trek romp or spy romp or something like that, or if I just toned it down or whatever, yes, I would probably have an even larger audience. Hell, Sovryn Tech might be doing very, very well for itself. Like very well for itself. Okay, not that I'm lacking in listeners. Okay, I'm in the 5 digits. I'm very happy about that. If it becomes more, awesome. Okay, I think there's going to need to be a cultural shift before it could become more. But okay, great. Could I get more sponsors? Could I end up on Sirius XM and stuff like this? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm not saying I'm that good. I know I'm good. I don't know if I'm that good. Okay, but regardless, I don't put limitations on myself. Like the old saying goes, actually, this is from Harlan Ellison. I'm an unlimited man in a limited world. But here's the thing, is that the erotic, the extreme, as you put it, parts and all this, that's what inspires me. That's what, makes me want to do this. I don't want to do it if that can't be a part of it. You understand? There's a ton of other tech shows that you can go listen to, okay, without that. And why would I add it? Why would I do this? Just go listen to them then. You don't need me. I'm here because I'm putting out, I've said this before, it's so funny. And again, I'm not knocking this person that wrote this in. I'm addressing kind of a larger audience. This happens every time. Something, in fact, I heard somebody say it right when I was speaking of PorkFest, right when I was at PorkFest, I heard somebody say it. Be the change you want to see in the world. Okay. I am being the change I want to see in the world. And I am pulling no punches, and I am, hiding nothing. I am absolutely being the change I want to see in the world. But when you actually want to, but if the change isn't what you like, then libertarians are like, well, but don't be that change. Yeah, be the change, but not that change. Oh, I see. Drives me nuts. When people are, that's what, yeah, be an individual, be the change, blah, blah, blah. But then when you actually are being an individual and you are being the change, that's the wrong kind of change. You're doing that. That's not the right kind of individual. That's not what I meant. It's like, I thought, gee, I'm sorry. It doesn't fit in with your mold. I guess that's not really being an individual, is it? So, but look, it's not only that. It's not only being the change. Like I said, if I didn't put this stuff out as I do, the erotic short fiction, the intros, all this other shit, it'd be pointless for me to do it. You got to understand how many, and I get it from guys too, and hey, good for you, okay? But really, I know who I'm, what kind of audience I'm aiming for, etc., and who I'm looking to please. If you knew how many messages, Sarah Ha messages, emails, whatever, that I get from women, okay? And yes, they are women, and I know their names, or some of them I know their names. Okay, if you knew how many messages and emails I got from them saying that they're getting off to my work, okay, be it the erotic short fiction, and there's plenty of them to tell me that, whatever it happens to be, from the newsletters, right? Because again, this is kind of in response to the newsletter, including the most recent one where there was frankly tentacle porn in it, for all intents and purposes. Okay. I'm going to address an aspect of that perhaps in a second. Maybe I might address it. Okay. But if you knew how many women, let me know, holy shit, I get off to what you do. I am orgasming. I am coming to what you do. That's all that matters to me. Okay, great. I feel so good about what I do because I know, and I can be honest with myself, that for thousands of years, and certainly for the past 100, so much of society is, not concerned whatsoever with female pleasure, right? So if I can somehow stem that tide and bring more, pleasure to women in the world, I am a happy, happy man. I am a very happy man, and I will keep doing it. I don't care. Understand this. if I only pleased one or two people with everything that I did, all the work that I put into Sovryn Tech, all the work that I put into the newsletter, whatever, if it only pleased one or two ladies, like that's a good enough audience for me. That's enough reason to do it. He said, well, don't you care about the men, Brian, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, I don't, because as I've talked about on Relationship Rhombus shows, I've talked about it on episodes, prime episodes of Sovryn Tech. In fact, I can remember a recent one where it was Stephanie and Ellen on and everything. Okay, I talked about it there. And I said, it's like, all men come. You're going to come. Guys don't have to worry about coming. You're going to come one way or the other, and you don't need my shit to do it, whatever. You're going to come. Okay, but as far as there being shit out there, and as far as being concerned with women coming, yeah, I said it. I've said it multiple times. This is not new for me. That's all I care about. It's all that matters. Get your dick out of the equation. I say it all the time, and it's so funny because like you people, well, not you people, but in the abstract, indefinite article, you people, you just keep complaining. I absolutely, I'll make this perfectly clear. Okay, I'm big on transparency. All right, as far as what I do with Sovryn Tech, I'll make this absolutely clear. I totally gear particularly my fictional content. I mean, the nonfiction stuff is kind of for everybody, but also I guess maybe in some ways it does. I totally gear my stuff for women's enjoyment. What are you going to cancel your patronage? What are you going to do about that? I mean, because honestly, like if that pisses people off, and I'm not saying it pissed off this emailer who's also a patron. I'm not saying it pissed them off, but if that pisses you off, it just proves the point that you don't give a shit about women's pleasure. Like that you literally are only thinking about your fucking dick. I mean, if those aspects of what I do aren't for you, then they're not for you, and you can largely ignore them. I mean, I put the erotic shit at the very bottom of the fucking newsletter. You don't like it? You don't have to read that part. Yeah, there's other parts of the newsletter where I might talk about sex a bit and be, unrated. But shit, this shouldn't be a problem anymore. It's the 21st century, for fuck's sake. How have we not gotten over this? That there are people who act this way, etc. And I hear all these people are so big about freedom of association, but they don't just walk away. They complain and act like, no, you need to change for me. And you know what maybe, to my mind, and this is when it comes to like entertainment and the entertainment industry in general, this is always the easiest of jabs. I understand that. It's the low-hanging fruit of what you can do to, like with the rating system for movies, right? Okay, so you can't show more than 3 humps in a, as in sex. You can't show more than 3 humps in a PG-13 movie until it gets rated R. But you can show people getting, entire populations getting wiped out. You can show people getting blown to bits, heads getting blown off, or, bullets going through somebody from a Desert Eagle or whatever. I mean, like, you can show all that shit and not worry about an R rating. But man, if you show any kind of sex, which is a life-affirming act instead of a life-ending one, and there's no problem, right? It's crazy. If you show sex, though, oh man, no, you're rated R, or you're NC-17. Fuck, you're getting an X rating. You have screwed the pooch. That's enough. I never get, for all the complaints I get about the sexual content that I put in, I never, ever, ever get a compliment for, hey, thank you for never espousing violence. Hey, thank you for, having a strong stance against war. Hey, thank you for this. Yeah, I mean, never is there a compliment for not not upholding violence. Never happens. And I don't want to say that, maybe this person isn't conservative. Maybe this emailer's not conservative, right? And maybe they're just saying, look, hey, you could be a much bigger deal, if you'd get the stuff out here. But I don't want to appeal to fucking conservatives, and I imagine they're really the only ones that would have a problem with my stuff. I don't give a rat's fucking ass about them. And I don't, because they're the same people who, will complain about all the sexuality being put on display, which is perfectly normal and fucking human. Okay. But then, they'll complain about that, but they won't say a word about, incessant appeals to violence and, and all this other stuff, which I don't think that is so much a part of the human condition. I don't. And I could talk about that more. Actually, we got a book that's going to discuss that, that I am doing, that's going to be releasing probably well throughout July and well into August. I'll be doing a Sovereign Tech First University book that discusses this very issue, how some of these emotions are not necessarily what one would call normal. So regardless of that, look, I'm not taking this stuff out, and again, I get a lot of emails about this, but like I said, if you even finally got one or two of people telling me, oh my God, I got off to what you wrote, or I got off to your little scene that you did, for the show and all this other stuff, or I still listen to Soviet Tech too, and blah blah blah. And if I just have like a couple women, like, or even one, just saying that just drives them wild, I'll keep doing it. That's enough for me. That's how much I give a shit about women's pleasure, baby. And I make no bones about it, but woo, there it is. So there you go. Again, though, yes, you're probably right. It'd be a much bigger show. I'd have a much bigger audience. I'd probably be asked to speak at all kinds of conferences. Not that I do that necessarily now. It could be a very different situation. But then also, I have no interest in that. Without that element, it's boring to me. It's just straight boring. And I do this ultimately for me, just as we all do things through, hopefully, enlightened self-interest, though for a lot of people, it's just unenlightened, I guess, self-interest. But through enlightened self-interest, everything's through self-interest. And so I know what I want to be. I know what I want to put out there. I know, et cetera, et cetera. And I do it. And I am being the change. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not being the change that you want. I'm being the change I want to be. Isn't that terrible? We'll never get anywhere if libertarians can't unite. Do you hear how stupid that sounds? Libertarians unite? Like, wait. Wait, isn't that all about individualism, but we all have to agree on how we want things to be? Okay. You enjoy your incessant contradictions, please. Anyway, let's move on to another question here. Let's get into a tech one, and then we can get into some maybe some other fun stuff here. So this is pretty cool. This is something that somebody posted on the community tab on Patreon, which I'm glad. I love it when people use that. And it is about a new mobile operating system, as in for mobile devices. It's called Postmarket OS. And there is a link in the show notes, but it's postmarketos.org. Very easy to remember. Now, I'm not exactly sure like what's behind the name Postmarket. It does, for its symbol, it's a triangle that looks like it has kind of recycle arrows to it, but it's not like the curved triangle like the recycle symbol is so well known for being. It's more of a very angular triangle. Sharp-edged triangle, I should say. Of course, triangles are angular. So I don't know if it means like a recycle, like if it's referencing recycling, like using old devices and putting a new OS on it and making the device fresh. Maybe that's kind of the idea that they're getting across. And again, I don't see any phrasing or terms to that effect. So if that's what they're shooting for, nice job on marketing, because I figured it out without, reading necessarily. I mean, there's stuff to read about it. They have a blog and everything where they're going over this. But, without really reading anything, that's what I read into, just your symbolism in your name and, your nomenclature. So if that was the deal, you did a great job. So let me read a little bit here. Postmarket OS, or what they call PMOS, which is kind of cool. It almost smacks of Palm OS. Woo! Back in the day, remember that trio? Big fan. So Postmarket OS is a touch-optimized, pre-configured Alpine Linux that can be installed on smartphones and other mobile devices. The project is at very early stages of development and is not usable for most people yet. I'm going to read a little bit about what they say here. Creating a sustainable mobile OS, that's the headline for it. Creating a sustainable mobile OS. So sustainable, that also kind of hints at recycling, right? It is 2018. Pick an average PC from 2008 and install a minimal Linux-based operating system. You will be able to do basic computing tasks, examples, surfing the web, reading emails, listening to music, chatting, just like on an expensive modern PC. You will even get security updates, so your old computer is protected just like a new one. On the current mobile landscape, you get none of that. Even expensive phones only have a few years of support. As time progresses, your phone becomes slower and slower, and the newest features will not work on it anymore. But Post-Market OS builds upon a real Linux distribution, which has no reason to drop support for old devices at all. And, assuming that you choose the right software, keeps the resource usage at a constant minimum instead of increasing it with every release. There's no reason to restrict features, such as full disk encryption, to newer devices either. We want to be able to use your devices until they break. Okay, so this fits in more with that recycling thing. Now, the irony is that before I even read about this, and I'll talk about Post-Market OS here a little bit. But before I even read this, kind of a similar mindset or something pointing in this direction was coming to me over the past really couple months. So I think this is apropos that this crosses my desk, as it were, or, the community tab on Patreon, which is mainly where I look for anything and any, interactions today with, Sovryn Tech listeners is on Patreon. But let me talk a little bit about Post-Market OS and what I think about it and everything. So yes, this is very early stages. It's probably going to be a very limited amount of hardware that can take advantage of it, even though they're going to want to configure it to where it could probably work with as many different devices out there as possible. But the reality of the situation is to get these things live, you want to concentrate on some proofs of concept, right? And so you go with like a Nexus 5 or a Nexus 6P or something like that, or even the Pixel phones to kind of prove your point that this thing genuinely works. Now, they have a great understanding, as you read through more of their materials, they have a great understanding of a lot of the problems out there. The fact that Wi-Fi is largely a closed-off protocol, among other things, where you're going to run into the issues of open sourcing. But overall, I like this idea. Like, I think this is great. Not just from like this kind of recycling, use old devices kind of perspective, but just from having a genuinely open operating system again, and one where you can really take control of it. Because Android, while you can get it to the stage where it can be that way, it's really not that way out of the box, and it's not optimized for that kind of functionality. Okay, and we are really, really overdue for some kind of third player in the mobile space. Now, I don't know that Post-Market OS is ever going to be that. Okay, in fact, I would argue it never will. Okay, not to where like it even gets any kind of brand cachet, as it were. Windows 10 Mobile can't do it. If Ubuntu can't do it, it's a hard sell that Post-Market OS is going to be able to pull it off. Okay, to where like they get mind share of some kind. Not necessarily that they even expect to be successful, but just where they're even getting some kind of mind share. That's a really, really tall order for any company and for any operating system really to do. And they do say for other mobile devices, so maybe this is something kind of like Asteroid OS, where it could work with watches as well, with smartwatches, or who knows? Maybe it could be adaptable. I mean, it's Alpine Linux, which is fine, and that's pretty adaptable stuff, to where it could work on a slew of different devices. Hey, dynamite. I hope that happens. But with that said, I mean, I think they have the right idea. This is something that needs to come into existence. It needs to be supported. When it gets a little bit up more in development, I will definitely give it a shot. I've certainly got some, a couple old phones laying around that I would love to test it out on. I'm all for that. Okay. And they seem aware of the various challenges that come with having a truly secure and open source mobile ecosystem. Okay. And so, yeah, I'm hopeful for this. And if anyone listening wants to check it out, do check it out. This needs to be a thing. This is the right attitude. This kind of stuff needs to happen. Again, I'm fully supportive of these kinds of ideas. I'm still trying to find out if anyone here, tell you what, if you want to help out the show, here's a totally free way other than your time, to help out the show. If you could find out what the fuck happened with Copperhead OS, like what is the score? Because I had heard something crazy was happening there. that like the lead developer left, threw away a bunch of private keys. I don't know. Like, if someone can find out what's happening with that, please message me and let me know. And if you want to get named credit, I'll give you named credit, and if you have a podcast, I'll mention your podcast. Like, I'm just, because I go to their website and I don't see anything. I go on Twitter, I'm not necessarily seeing anything. Like, I'm baffled as to what this person at Porkfest was talking about. I'm not saying they were lying. I'm trying to find out about it. And there's no tech, like Hacker News, a bunch of other ones aren't reporting about it. Supposedly Copperhead OS was totally fallen under. I just want to find the info about it. So let me know if you have info about this, like, give me links, please give me something. So anyway, I suppose I could email people at Copperhead OS. I just haven't, I don't know. The story, I guess, just didn't mean that much to me because I do, I roll my own shit, right? Like, that's the whole point of Dark Android. Anyway, okay. So my kind of this abstract notion that's been coming to mind for me, and that is, this idea of post-market OS and some others. Now, while open source hardware, which I've said before, needs to become more of a thing, no question about that, okay? Really, the technology, like a lot of the technology that we need to solve what's going on, say, with the surveillance society that we live in and everything, it all already exists. Like, and a lot of the software to use and all of these different things, like, it all already exists. We just have to use it, right? It's not like we're waiting for shit. Because I keep hearing this. It's like, oh, well, we're waiting for mesh networking to do this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, I guess we're waiting for someone to develop the implementation, but it's not impossible. Like, there's people either A, working on it, or B, the tech is there, just no one's using it. And I think that there's a lot to read into this realization. And I think it is a major realization. I don't think it's if you think, well, no, duh, I knew that. No, I don't think you're getting what I'm saying. And I understand that I'm being kind of broad right now. Okay. But I think that there's something, like, one of the things that I do as a tech show, okay, or that I've said, because, one of the fortunate things about me doing a tech show is that there's always going to be new news, right? Because everybody's developing some new kind of software, some new tech, blah, blah, blah. The funny thing is actually that doesn't need to be true. I mean, yes, better tech that allows us to go into space and do a lot of this other stuff. But a lot of the things that you want to do, the ways that you want to interact with other humans, encryption, hell, even like money that isn't government stuff, right? Like, a lot of these things, we already have all this. We literally have the alternative ecosystem, or the alternative civilization even. Okay, that could just exist right now, and could just happen. Like, I don't need to do new news about a new messaging app, right? Because we've got that licked. Okay, I don't need to do, new news about some new blockchain technology, because a lot of that is kind of licked. I mean, you can hone it down a little bit, but by and large, like, the bulk of what we actually need and really even want already exists. Like, there doesn't, as far as within the consumer space and what happens on a computer or even on a mobile device, I mean, you got post-market OS that's kind of addressing a lot of that. There actually isn't a whole ton of new news. And this is why, and I think that people in Silicon Valley actually know this. And this is why every startup and even major companies are all running towards subscription models, because they know there's not a whole hell of a lot more to innovate, right? They're terrified, because, you can only get so many people on board with this shit. And then also, like, what did Microsoft have to do with Office? What, they added the fucking ribbons, That's what they needed to do to get people off of 2003. They're terrified because, oh shit, nobody's buying Office anymore. And so they make up this bullshit, UI just to try and make you believe that you're getting something better when there's no real change. The DocX format, it allows for this, it allows for that. It's far superior to Docs. Not really. I mean, be honest. So it's a funny thing is that, and I've kind of hinted at this over the past couple of years before on Sovereign Tech, like, tech news, if you listen to other tech podcasts and everything, I mean, there's a reason I allowed Sovereign Tech to be broad in scope and get into science and things like this. I mean, in science, there's still new discoveries to be made, no doubt. Okay, but let's be clear here that as far as like software and honestly with like a lot of what's happening even in hardware, yes, we need more open source hardware, but it's not like it's not possible. It's totally possible. It's not an engineering problem that's waiting to be solved. We don't need Nikola Tesla. Okay, it's licked. The computer ecosystem is wholly mature, minus quantum computers, if that actually really becomes a thing. Okay, it's very mature. The mobile space is obviously mature. Do you really give a shit about what new phone comes out? If you do, you're just buying into marketing and not an actual product. And that's, one of if this mindset settles in, and I know that Apple and Google and whoever else are terrified if people come to that realization, then things like post-market OS actually become very important and become a real contender, because that's their mindset, is that, no, there's nothing wrong with your old computer. Your old computer can do all this stuff just fine. You don't need modern hardware. You can do everything you wanted to do on an old phone. You don't need anything modern. Just install our OS instead of their bullshit, instead of Apple's and Google's bullshit. It's a fair point to bring up. What the hell are we doing? There doesn't have to be new tech news. Sure, there's ways you can, new catalytic processes or something that you can do that can make stuff more efficient. There's a lot of that. Oh, batteries can get a little bit better. Sure, you could talk about that sort of stuff. But as far as what's actually happening within the digital realm itself, no, I don't. And I might eat my words tomorrow. Hell, I might eat my words in 5 minutes after I read some piece of news or something. But I really don't think that there's no other leaps within software. Even virtual reality, I don't think that there's going to be that not that we can't already imagine. I don't think there's going to be any kind of crazy leap. I don't believe it. I really don't. Sovereign Tech isn't going to go anywhere, because I can talk about a whole lot of other things than software. I hope I've proven that to people. But maybe we could come up with new encryption schemes and everything, but sure, come up with new ones. But bottom line being, we have rock solid math to take advantage of, and to use. We really do, and Signal Protocol is just one example, and, one of the more popular ones. But there's other ones where, that math is perfectly solid, and the encryption is great. Maybe the implementation could get fixed a little bit or something, sure. But again, by and large, I don't see where there's going to be any kind of grand change. All the things that we can imagine doing with computers, etc., whatever, it's there. There's going to be nothing new under the sun as far as that goes. Seriously, do me a favor. Go listen to some. I don't talk about Apple, about Macs much, okay? Go listen to some Apple podcast. What is the number one subject being talked about by them? Okay, other than the new MacBooks keyboards are shit, and Apple finally admitted it. Other than that, what's everybody talking about? Dark mode. Are you fucking serious? The biggest thing you're talking about on your stupid fucking Apple podcast that has over 100,000 listens is fucking dark mode? It's fine to mention it. Sure, I love dark mode as much as anybody else on anything, okay? But it shouldn't be the most talked about fucking feature of an operating system. Holy shit. You want to tell me that there's going to be some kind of innovation in the desktop and mobile, or even mobile, that, in the computing space? Fuck no. And that's all right. That's okay. But it's okay for us. It's okay for the consumer, for the end user. It's okay. For the companies, though, it's terrifying, right? Because that means no more growth, no more product to sell, blah, blah, blah. That terrifies the fuck out of them, because they become meaningless. So anyway, post-market OS, 2 thumbs up. I'm interested. I think Alpine Linux is fine if you're basing it on that. I'm interested to see, how they handle baseband firmware and things like this. I'll be keeping an eye on it. But yeah, it has my support. I'm rock and roll. I think that kind of idea and that kind of development is wonderful. I'm also, really reticent to get excited about that sort of thing, because there have been great, Byzantine Linux. I was so excited about Byzantine Linux. which was a Linux operating system designed now for laptops and desktops, but it was designed to work within a mesh networking environment. And this was years ago. And it just fell away. It just fell off, and it's not really doing anything. So it's tough for me to get excited about these, a lot of new operating systems. But I mean, certainly I think the ideas are wonderful, and post-market OS, go for it. Have a good time. I really do. Maybe I'll get somebody on. If they can get a little more of a product, I would happily interview one of their devs. And look, and I get it. It's a challenge because they're probably working on their spare time, no money whatsoever. And of course, like, I totally understand. I'm not being mean. I totally understand why they don't, they might not be, up to where people can really, where it can be deployed a little more en masse. I completely respect that. Okay. And I think that's wonderful, that they're doing it in their spare time and it's their side hustle and whatever. Phenomenal. Okay. I'm just saying that, like, for me to get them on here, like, I'm not going to put my reputation on the line for projects that aren't bullshit. I mean, I'm certainly not going to do it for bullshit projects, but for projects that aren't going to stand the test of time. Okay, like, I can't do it. Because I have as much as I think reputation's kind of crazy, I have a bit of a reputation to protect, quite frankly. So I got that professionalism I got to worry about with this show, right? Anyway, all right, let's get into some fun stuff here towards the end. This is also from the Patreon community tab. Hey, Brian, speaking of A.C. Crispin and her Han Solo novels, I've had a copy of her Star Trek novel, Yesterday's Sun, for some time. I think it came with a box full of Star Wars novels I got on eBay way back in the day. Now that I've been getting into Star Trek, I might jump on that soon. Love A.C. Crispin's Han Solo novels. Talked about that on the show with Robin, my good man Robin, and we, during the Star Wars update for June. So Yesterday's Sun, good book. Let me talk a little bit about, because I've actually gotten this question a couple times. Let me talk a little bit about, because some people ask me, okay, I want to start reading Star Wars novels. Where do I start? And then I get people saying, what Star Trek novels should I read, etc. And I've kind of hinted at this during Star Trek updates, where it's been just me doing Star Trek updates, not the ones where it's Stephanie, Ellen, and I. With the Star Trek novels, like Yesterday's Sun, good book. They're great adventures. There's some awesome Star Trek novels out there. Spock's World, Best Destiny, Prime Directive. I mean, there's a Sarek. Sarek's one of my favorite Star Trek novels ever. There's a laundry list of great Star Trek books. And they're fun adventures. The thing is that they're not, unlike with Star Wars, and even with the old expanded universe of Star Wars, this was still kind of true. Star Wars, everything in Star Wars is considered canon. And or even with the old expanded universe, and if you don't know what I'm talking about with that, go listen to the Star Trek update from June with Robin and I. Always a lot of fun. Even if you don't like Star Wars, I guarantee you'll have fun listening to it, because, Robin's just dynamite. So, even in the old expanded universe of Star Wars, it was still largely canon. And when you would buy, say, technical manuals and guides to the Star Wars universe and all this other stuff, content from those books, from the novels and comics of Star Wars, would be in those books that, say, were more about the movies or something, but it would still be a part of it. As to where with Star Trek has always drawn a really hard line that, what happens in the comic books and the novels does not have bearing on the movies and the television shows. And it took me, when I was growing up, I read so many Star Trek books because I just had to have more Star Trek. And we're talking about at a time like even pre-Voyager, like before there was a Voyager, before there was even a Deep Space Nine. The whole reason really that I became such a voracious reader was I needed more Star Wars in my life and more Star Trek as a very young person. And I remember even in third grade, Miss Waskowitz was the teacher's name. She was great. She didn't believe me at first that I read Heir to the Empire in third grade, because it's this huge book. I mean, it's a full-on adult, that is not for kids at all, not even close. She couldn't believe that I read it. And I was like, no, I really read it. And I told her everything about it. And, it's not like I could just go look it up on Wikipedia or something and get it in a more, digestible format for somebody in the age of the single digits, right? Who's in third grade. No, I explained it to her what happened, and she kind of, I don't know, however she went about verifying it. And she's like, holy shit, this kid actually read that book. And, I'm glad, because I think that helped me get to a much higher literacy level and, dare I say, higher intellect at a younger age, because I just had to have more Star Wars and I had to have more Star Trek. I needed more of these adventures. I already watched all of this, blah, 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 and now I need more. And, that says Star Wars. Oh, that says Star Trek, blah, blah, blah. And so, I would read these books long before I ever had any understanding of the fact of, but the books don't actually matter compared to what happens in the movies or what happens to what happens in the TV shows or something like this. When I finally realized that about Star Trek, that, actually these have no bearing on the television show and Gene Roddenberry doesn't give a rat's ass about them. Then it's like, okay, well then why bother? Because it's not something that I can necessarily talk about, with other Star Trek fans as if this is how we can explain and discuss and get excited about, our favorite franchise universes. So Star Trek books I recommend with a warning. To understand that most Star Trek fans don't bother reading them. I mean, there's a lot, otherwise they'd stop making them if there weren't a lot of people buying them. But most Star Trek fans really don't bother. There's some really great moments. Some of the best moments in Star Trek have happened in these books, but again, they don't have any larger bearing. And for me, I'm filling my head with so much shit. I just can't I need to stick very clear with what is within the canon, so that way I don't confuse myself. You know what I mean? Because I'll just start running off about things and getting in a big rant about these fictional universes as if they were real. But anyway, you get my point. So with Star Trek books, now the Star Trek Discovery books are being considered more or less canon. Okay, more or less. Or at least they're being called canon until they're not. As to where that is a much higher ranking than any of these books have ever gotten, compared to the past as far as Star Trek goes. I mean, that's amazing that that's the case. Okay. So I do read the Star Trek Discovery books. Enterprise, I love the show Enterprise so much. And Voyager. I do read both the Voyager. They're Simon & Schuster in 2006, I think they did this big relaunch where they did a rebooted universe where they had all the books just start sharing a universe, be it the Next Generation books, the DS9 books, the Voyager books, the whatever. They're all interconnected. They created their own little canon, and they all took place after the last season of each show. I love Voyager so much that, yes, I do read the latest Voyager books, and they usually come out with only one a year, one or two a year maybe. And I read all of the Enterprise books, which have been tremendous. The whole Rise of the Federation novel series and everything have been awesome. I really love the Enterprise books. The Enterprise books feel so Star Trek. It's crazy just how much I hear Scott Bakula's voice in my head as Captain Archer. So yeah, the Enterprise books are phenomenal. I totally recommend those. If you don't want to just read Discovery, I completely recommend the Enterprise books. The other ones, there are the is it not Shattered? There's the Section 31 books, which are really interesting, including the latest one by David Mack. I think it was called Control, which was really weird. I mean, I'm obsessed with Section 31, so I read the Section 31 books, in case you didn't notice that I was obsessed with Section 31. But that was really wild, because you find out that there was actually this computer program that more or less created Starfleet and the Federation and everything. It was a crazy, crazy idea. I loved it. You want it. Spoiler alert there, but believe me, I didn't really give anything away. You got to check it out to understand. Those are really enjoyable. So some of the mini-series ones are interesting is my point. There's the Mirror Universe novels that they have, Myriad Universes, I think they call it, is the novel series. Those are really cool. There's one, in fact, that's really sexy. It has a cover with 7 of 9 on it in a Klingon uniform. Holy fuck. Yes. Give me more, please. And I'll take more Intendant Kira any day. Yes. Okay. So there you go with Star Trek novels. Yeah, there's some great ones out there that are well worth reading. But also, keep them in perspective. I've enjoyed what I've read from the relaunch that Simon & Schuster did, but there you go. Anyway, I think I've covered that question well, at least over the past year, I know I've covered it before, but just to bring it up again, and because I know Star Trek has reached a new level of hotness, I think it was worth discussing quick. Or maybe I mentioned it in a Star Trek update, but now you'll get it in a Q&A because not everybody listens to those. Because again, I try to provide a multitude of content for all different kinds of listeners because Sovryn Tech has all different kinds of listeners. So there you go. Okay, let's move on to, here's just a quick one at the end of a much larger comment that I'm not going to share here because it's kind of personal. Any mid-year updates with your workout regimen? I follow your advice pretty closely. Okay, first off, don't follow my advice that closely. I share with you what I do and what's working for me, but I, unlike other people, actually believe all humans are individuals. And so what works for me may not work for you. Okay, it may not. It may, but it may not. So don't follow me too closely. Also, fortunately, I'm in love with a doctor, and she definitely helps me out a lot with a lot of my health questions and things like that. It's really wonderful to have Stephanie as a resource in that way, even though obviously she means so much more to me. She means everything to me. But yeah, so just be careful with with listening to me. As far as anything I've added in, I think the only major thing I've added in is I'm to the point now where the weights that I'm handling, particularly like when I'm on chest day or shoulders, I'm to the point that I had to buy wrist straps, stiff wrist straps. And if you're really, if I think of it, I'll put the link to the show notes in the show notes to the ones that I purchased. They're not expensive. I think maybe they're $10, something like that. They really weren't expensive at all. But I did buy wrist straps, and all they are, it's a strap. You have a loop that goes through your thumb to kind of hold it in place. And then the rest is a strap that literally goes around your wrist, has about maybe 3 or 4 inch width. And you can get like a softer kind, or you can get a really stiff kind where it'll really hold your wrist in place, or it can allow for some motion. I went with a really stiff kind, and I do use that again when I'm doing like chest presses or military presses, when doing shoulders, things like this, because the amount of weight that I am pressing up with the dumbbells. Okay, if you're working with a straight bar, this may not be as necessary for you to deal with because the bar is handling some of the motion and like in a way, which is both a good and a bad thing, I think. But if you're working with dumbbells, really, really heavy dumbbells, I can't actually lift them up without having those wrist straps on. So I've gotten to that point to where I really need those. But you don't want to become dependent upon wrist straps either, okay? If you don't have to use stiff wrist straps, don't use them. All right, you want to let your musculature, your muscles and everything, get used to their natural motion. Okay, which is why I mainly use dumbbells and I don't use a barbell, or a straight bar, because I want, my body to move in the way that it's kind of designed to move. I think there's a time and place for a straight bar. Sure, I can understand those arguments. I'm not saying don't use that. I'm just saying that's why I do what I do. But yeah, so wrist straps, big fan. Not just simple wrist straps attached to a pair of fingerless gloves either. I mean, full-on wrist straps is what I've had to go with. That's about the only major thing that I've added in because I think I did an update because you said mid-year. I think I did an update in January of this year where I talked about, that I'm using, hook straps to do deadlifts and things like that now. But yeah, definitely the wrist straps for any kind of presses, it's a requirement now. Otherwise I can't get the weight up, or I sure as fuck don't feel comfortable getting the weight up because I'm worried my wrist is going to, I don't know. But they help. They really help. They help out a lot. And for the first couple weeks, it'll actually hurt because you are getting kind of that support and your hand is going down onto it, I think. And so it did hurt a little bit, but then you get used to it pretty quickly. So, but that's about the only mid-year addition that I've made as far as working out goes. So, okay. Let's get into our last bit here. Of course, I like to end off a Wednesday Q&A with the album of the week, which became popular during the Wednesday Q&A, then became so popular people demanded that it be in the Sovryn Tech Prime episodes, and then to shake things up at the Sovryn Tech Prime episode, I moved them back to where it's a part of the Wednesday Q&A because there are still quite a few people that really love it. So I'm gonna toss a classic on you here, because the last time I did a classic, which was the '94 Motley Crue album, and if you didn't listen to it, don't laugh at once you hear Motley Crue. Listen to it; it's not really Motley Crue, But I got such a great response from that. It's like, all right, well, let's try out another classic, even though I'm going to go in a much different vein than Motley Crue. So we're going to set the Wayback Machine here for 1984. And yeah, we're going way back. Not 94, we're going to 84. And this, here we go, Chicago 17 by the band Chicago. Now, if you don't know, okay, first off, I'm a huge Chicago fan, like huge Chicago fan. I've often said, when the question comes up, who's better, the Beatles or the Stones, I always say that's bullshit. It's Chicago, and actually not even including the Beach Boys in that conversation is an insult, because most people forget just how heated a battle there was between the Beach Boys and the Beatles. But anyway, I think Chicago is, they're the most successful American band in history, whether people realize it or not. They are. And they just are. Deal with it. Like, sorry, if you think they suck, okay, but there's numbers that speak for themselves. There's a huge conversation to be had around, whether the past 80 years of the music industry, before, the past 10 anyway, if that was just some kind of fluke in human history, sure, that's another story to talk about, okay? And how do you actually judge those metrics? All of that is a completely different conversation to be had. But within what we understand of people winning Grammys and, album sales and things like this and all that, sorry, Chicago's just like the biggest thing, perhaps, other than the Beatles ever, okay? And again, just look at the numbers. It's what you got. So, okay, so Chicago 17. Chicago numbers all of their, this is the other point I wanted to tell you. Chicago numbers all of their albums, and they're up to like 30-something, okay? Their last one came out in 2014. I don't always remember the numbers, especially for the later albums. But Chicago 17 came out in 1984. Now, this is just after. You have to understand that Chicago had a sound, we'll say before, I guess that would have been what would technically be Chicago 14. Chicago had a sound when they had their lead guitarist, Terry Kath, who Terry Kath is probably, I'm not going to say probably. Terry Kath is the greatest guitarist of all time. He died, unfortunately, I think in 78. Terry Kath is just the greatest guitarist of all time. And if you want proof, who was Terry Kath? Who was Terry Kath's biggest fan? Jimi Hendrix. There you go. Yeah, Jimi Hendrix saying my favorite guitarist, and who was a contemporary, by the way. Not like, so he was not like Jimi Hendrix is looking to the past. He's saying, who is my favorite guitarist, of all time, anywhere? It was Terry Kath. I think that says enough about just how great a guitarist Terry Kath was. I love Eddie Van Halen. I love all those guys, Ace. Hey, Terry Kath is it. Okay. And Chicago lost Terry Kath. And when they did, they actually went to kind of a disco sound for a couple albums, for 14 and 15, I think it was. And then in, I guess this was 1980 or 81, when Chicago 16 came out, which ended up being kind of a resurgence for the band. That's when Chicago went from being more of a rock band to sort of this ballad band, right? That does everything like You're the Inspiration, blah, blah, blah. Which, by the way, You're the Inspiration is off of Chicago 17. This is when Peter Cetera really takes over, okay, as lead singer, not just as the bassist or the guy, doing any kind of backing vocals or things like this. Chicago 16, tremendous album. Obviously, it's one of the best-selling albums of all time. For, all the songs that were on there, kind of the resurgence and the strength of the ballads and the softer stuff on there, even though there's some other, there's some good hooks on it as well. Chicago 17 is the sequel to that. It's also the last album that Peter Cetera would be a part of, which maybe I'm a bigger fan of Peter Cetera than I am of actually Chicago itself, because I kind of follow where Cetera goes. And it's always interesting. For me, I don't know what it is with me, but the bassists, I always love the bassists. Like, they're always my favorite member of the band. I don't consciously think that way. It just ends up happening. With Motley Crue, Nikki Sixx, easily my favorite member. With Kiss, Gene Simmons, all the way. Mr. Big, Billy Sheehan, no doubt. No doubt about it there. Chicago, Peter Cetera, all the way. I don't know, the bassist. Well, I've said this before that maybe I said it in like a newsletter or something, but I know I've written this before and said it somewhere or whatever. that the bass, more so than even the drums, I think is the heartbeat of the music. And so you kind of, you sort of have I think a leadership position, or like this really foundational position within a band when you do that. Even like Van Halen, Michael Anthony. I mean, fuck. Like that guy's rock solid. Man, you want to talk about a guy that can sing. Woo. I mean, people forget. Like that guy can sing. Phenomenal. Anyway, not that I don't mind lead guitarists either. I mean, hey, I'm a huge Satch fan, believe me. But yeah, so anyway, point being, so Chicago 17. You get this album that is the sequel to one of the biggest albums of all time, that being Chicago 16. You get the huge song, You're the Inspiration. Of course, that's not the only major song on there. In fact, I dare say, I argue this album is literally track for track. Like, you can listen to every song on there, and they even got back to, like, something that a lot of people don't realize about early Chicago music was that it was very political, like heavily anti-war, a lot of political stuff. Chicago 17 starts to dip their toes a bit again in the political of whatever's going on. Like, you have the song We Can't Stop the Hurtin', which has to do with the homeless problem, which was certainly a huge problem in the 80s. I mean, I think it would probably always be a problem, but it's nice that they're kind of hitting that. But Chicago 17, again, it has that. So with Chicago 16, they bring in David Foster, right, who to produce it. And this is, David Foster is comparable to like Mutt Lange coming in for Def Leppard and just like taking them to the next level. David Foster combined with Peter Cetera just takes Chicago to this whole other level, a different level. And Foster brings in guys from Toto, to come in and help write some songs and everything. I mean, it just becomes this huge collaborative project. And Foster just has this amazing sound in his head of what he thinks that all of this can be, thanks to the strength of Cetera's very unique vocals. And I think with Chicago 17, they reached their pinnacle. I mean, it's, they lose Cetera after that, and Cetera goes on to a pretty successful solo career. But regardless, like, Chicago really hit a peak with 17, and it opens up so strong. There's the song Stay the Night. You're never going to hear Stay the Night on the radio. It's probably my favorite Chicago song. It's such a fun, because, like, it's romantic. It's a love song, which is sort of what a lot of people expect from Chicago, but it's got a little, it's got a little groove to it. It's got a little guitar groove to it that gives it a little more strength, where it isn't just You're the Inspiration or like Hard Habit to Break, right? Which is also on this album. I mean, this is the strength of this album. A lot of people don't realize a lot of the hits that you know of from Chicago all come from Chicago 17, and nobody has any fucking clue. Along Comes a Woman, Remember the Feeling, Please Hold On, Prima Donna, Once in a Lifetime. I mean, it's track for track. This is an amazing, amazing album, and a great way to rediscover not only Chicago, again, 80s Chicago, because there's 70s Chicago, then there's 80s Chicago, right? You have Terry Kath, and then you have more of like what people think of as Cetera Chicago, even though that was really only a couple albums in the 80s, before he gets replaced with another lead singer. But they keep that kind of general sound going. But also to experience, I think, a version of rock that doesn't get enough, of all ironies, love, because a lot of it's about love. But you think like, Toto, which tremendous band, and still making great music. I've talked about their album 14, which came out a few years ago, which, is some of their best work they've ever done. I mean, you think about your Richard Marx's even, who's kind of a little bit of a later guy in all of that, but like this kind of softer rock that I think became maligned and made fun of, for playing on whatever stupid light rock stations or soft radio stations or something. But I think there's some real gems in all of that. And I think it's an unfairly maligned type of music, style of music. So yeah, I would check this album out. I think it's smooth. I think it's sexy. If you think it's cheesy, I think it's a cheese you should try to integrate, because I guarantee you just about any lady you play it for is going to dig it. If you're driving down the road, it's going to happen. Okay. I mean, this is just really, really smooth stuff. You gotta love Chicago. You know what's so weird? I was thinking about it too with Chicago. Like, those guys came out with an album or two every year for like 15 years, but they're not the only ones. And someday I got to figure out how the hell and why this happened. You think Kiss, AC/DC, I mean, there's a bunch of bands where from like, say the either 1970, the early 70s into like maybe the mid 80s or something like that, you had these bands that were literally coming out with 9 to 12 track albums once or twice a year, every fucking year. Without fail, there'd be a new album out. That's nuts. We're lucky if we get an album like every 3 or 4 years from people today. Yeah, something's off. Something's up. I don't know. The talent's not the same today as it was. I don't know what the deal is. Or maybe it speaks to that whole fluke of what the music industry had been for, those decades, was that you could have these guys, like, for example, Chicago, right? They had their little, log cabin compound that they literally lived on for like a decade, and they would just write all their music there and have orgies and do their concerts and everything. I mean, literally in the same spot. Maybe just the music industry could afford you to be, you could just be a guitarist and you could make millions of dollars a year just for being a guitarist or just for being a drummer, as to where today that's not true. And so because of that, your creative juices, and you weren't worried about shit, and maybe it was a mixture of the drugs and drinking, I don't know, but it allowed for such a wellspring of creativity that's just unfucking matched. I think there's a larger subject to get to talk about there, but I've talked enough about Chicago 17. This is probably my favorite Chicago album. Certainly for the 80s it is. Maybe for the 70s I might think of a different one, but because I just love Terry Kath's work. Yeah, I love Chicago 17. Like I said, just opens right up strong with Stay the Night. That is definitely my favorite Chicago song. I'll come right out and say that. I mean, it's not as, hard rocking as some of the Kath's work, but it is so good. Or so enjoyable, such a good little feeling. I don't know. I dig it. So anyway, all right, that's it for this week's Wednesday Q&A. I'm going to wrap things up here. Of course, you got again, July 8th, 4 p.m. Eastern. You will have we'll do our live Q&A hangout. That's just coming up this Sunday, and more content to come. So I will see all of you on the other side.